You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, the 17th of December. Pagans who abuse children as young as 3 years are given 32 years in prison. Landlady wants Qatada out of newly rented luxury house. Struggling stores slashing prices by up to 80%. John Puxty today in Durham in Norfolk. French prosecutors ask EU Parliament to take immunity from Marine Le Pen. Brutal attack by Muslim cab driver on the great-grandson of former Prime Minister Adenauer. 52-year-old Malaga woman throws herself off a fourth-floor balcony. Gun control laws failed Connecticut children. Sharia thirsty takes solid first-round lead in Egypt. Electroshock torture handcuffs now patented. Thought for the day, how long can the world ignore Islam? And finally, the older and smellier it is, the better it is for you. UK News. White witches who conducted horrifying ritualistic sex abuse on children as young as 3 in Cornish Coven jailed for 32 years. Peter Petrowski and Jack Kemp were said to have worn ceremonial robes and pagan paraphernalia while they abused young girls in Cornwall during the 1970s. Police believe one of their victims may have been as young as 3 when the abuse started. The judge described the victims' experiences as nothing less than harrowing, as he condemned their utterly horrifying crimes, sentencing Petrovsk to 18 years in prison and Kemp to 14. The pair, aged 72 and 69, showed little emotion as they were led from the dock at Truro Crown Court and into custody. Hate preacher Abu Qatada's new £450,000 four-bedroom home, paid for by you. Radical preacher Abu Qatada has moved into a new taxpayer-funded house worth $450,000 near to a church, and the furious owner wants him out. The fanatical Muslim who preached hate sermons towards the west arrived in the leafy suburb of northwest London last week. He had left his previous £400,000 four-bedroom rented home near Wembley Stadium after apparently complaining it was too small for him and his family. He shares his new detached home, which is paid for by state handouts, with his wife and 4 of their 5 children. Similar homes in the area have sold for close to £500,000. But the woman who owns the smart 4-bedroom house reacted angrily last night after discovering the identity of her new tenant, and said she would try to evict him. She said she was astonished to be told the radical cleric had been allowed to live in the property, which she rents out through an agency for £1,400 a month. Speaking from her home, the owner said, "I had no idea who was living there. I have read about this man and why he was in prison. He doesn't seem like a nice character. A family member was living at the house until they recently passed away. Now we're letting it out via the local estate agent, who told me they would most probably let it to a member of their staff. We signed a contract with the company for 6 months, but there is no way I would have given my permission to rent the house to a man like that. Not ever." Struggling stores are slashing prices by up to 80% as they launch the greatest Christmas sale ever seen to tempt back missing shoppers. The number of customers in the high street and shopping centres is considerably down on last year, and those who are out are spending less, according to the British Retail Consortium. £1 billion and counting, what Britain has paid to Brussels in the last 40 years. As David Cameron travels to Brussels today for another EU summit, it emerged that from 1973 to this year, Britain has paid £97 billion in net payments. The Prime Minister is likely to seize on the vast sum when he finally sets out his vision for the UK's place in Europe in a major speech, now delayed until the new year. Now I hand you over to John Puxty, who is in Durham, Norfolk.
Durham, the heart of Norfolk. The town lies in the geographical centre of Norfolk and is named after an ancient deer park. Sometimes known as East Durham, the site has been occupied since Neolithic times. Axe heads, flint scrapers and work flints have been found in the area. St Withburga, the youngest daughter of Anna, king of the Angles, founded a monastery here in the 7th century after seeing a vision of the Virgin Mary. On her death, she was interred in Dereham Parish Church, St Nicholas. Some years later her body was stolen by monks from Ely, and as a result, a holy well sprang up near the church. In the 18th century a building went up over the spring to turn St Withburga's well into a bathhouse in an attempt to create a new Buxton, or Bath, but the idea never took off. A railway track was laid in 1847, connecting the town with Wymondham. The following year another line was opened to King's Lynn. In 1849 another line was opened to Fakenham and Wells-on-Sea. Soon Dereham had its own railway depot and extensive sidings, but by the 1960s the railway had all but gone. Today Mid-Norfolk Railway Trust preserves an 11-mile stretch of line, all that remains of Dereham's railway past. The town had furniture factories, a clock factory and a hobby factory which made fret saws for making wooden models. The most famous industry was Cranes of Dereham, which built giant 100-ton trailers that carried equipment such as transformers for companies like Wynns or Pickford's. Linger a while in Dereham and see Bishop's Burner's Cottage, built in 1502. There is a windmill, a museum of rural life, and the headquarters of the Mid-Norfolk Railway.
Thank you, John. This puts Norfolk in a new light, especially from Noel Coward's famous quote, "Frightfully flat Norfolk." European news. Dimmy French prosecutors in the French city of Lyon have requested that the European Parliament strip National Front leader Marine Le Pen of her immunity so she can be prosecuted for comparing Muslim prayers to the Nazi occupation. INN Justice Ministry spokesman Pierre Anse told AFP the request was sent to European Parliament President Martin Schulz late last month. The request was reportedly related to an ongoing judicial probe into remarks made by Le Pen in a speech to supporters of her Front National party in December 2010, during which she denounced public Islamic prayers on the streets of France. For those who like to talk about World War II, to talk about occupation, we could talk about, for once, the occupation of our territory, she said. This is an occupation of parts of our territory. There are no armoured vehicles, no soldiers, but it is an occupation all the same, and it weighs on people. Like with so many national parliaments, members of the European Parliament enjoy immunity from criminal and civil liability for opinions expressed as part of their duties, unless the chamber votes to lift the immunity. A nationalist spokesperson stated, "Like so much of what we nationalists have to put up with, these Marxists are delving into the past to find something to whinge about." There was a brutal attack by a Muslim cab driver in Cologne, Germany, on Nalborn Adenauer, the great-grandson of former Prime Minister Konrad Adenauer, who in 1949 began the immigration policies which opened the floodgates to all the Muslim problems Germany faces today. In Cologne, the taxis are virtually all driven by Arabs and Turks. A harmless argument with a taxi driver ended for Nal in the hospital with severe facial injuries. He got into a taxi with two friends after a party. Shortly afterwards there developed a dispute over the open side of the window of the vehicle, and the driver threw out his passengers. But that wasn't enough, and the driver swore at Nal with a kind of insult that is so typical of Muslims. Excuse my language, I fuck your mother, and carried out a vicious beating. Adenauer was taken to the hospital Hohenlind Cologne. The frightening diagnosis is fractures of skull base, frontal sinus, orbit, nasal septum, and a fracture of the nasal bone. A nerve in the face has been cut and he will remain deaf. Luckily Adenauer's eyes are still intact and he has no brain hemorrhage. He was in surgery for 4 hours and had to have the bones bolted to steel plates. The perpetrator must have struck him with something big, said Chief Medical Jochen Wustrow. This is something I see, thank God, very rarely, but unfortunately the violence in Cologne is getting worse. A World Date reporter comments, "It may be poetic justice in regard to Nal's grandfather, but a terrible one. Where are his human rights? It shows that it isn't the so-called right-wing or racists that will cause problems, it is the immigrant population themselves. They will turn Europe into the third world if allowed. Madrid, a 52-year-old Spanish woman who was about to get evicted from her home threw herself off the fourth-floor balcony, local media reported Friday. Dolores Garcia took her own life in the Los Corazon neighbourhood of Malaga, Andalusia, 3 days after receiving an eviction notice for failure to make her mortgage payments. A former tobacconist who went bankrupt and sold her business to care for her ailing 96-year-old mother, Garcia was so distressed about her imminent conviction, neighbours said. Garcia's death brought the total of such suicides in crisis-ridden Spain to 7. Bank of Italy says top 10% control 45.9% of riches. The Bank of Italy said the top 10% of Italy's richest families control almost half of the nation's wealth, according to the regulator's monthly bulletin report. The poorer half of the nation's families own 9.4% of the country's riches, the bank said, adding that the distribution of wealth in the Eurozone's third largest economy was characterised by a high degree of concentration. The Bank of Italy indicated that the Gini index, which measures the degree of inequality of wealth in the nation, is on the rise. The bank said Italian families' wealth dropped 5.8% as a result of the economic crisis since 2007, the year in which it peaked in real terms. Record figures for Sweden Democrats. A new poll puts the far-right Sweden Democrat Party at a record 10%, with an increase in support amongst older voters and voters in north-central Sweden. The SIFO poll, published in the Svenska Dagbladet and Göteborgs-Posten dailies on Sunday, showed that the Sweden Democrats have gained 1.5 percentage points since November. By comparison, in August, the party polled at 6.2%. Also in Sweden, the Open Borders Centre Party. The Swedish Centre Party believes free immigration into Sweden could solve the country's labour power needs. The Centre Party has outlined the new immigration policy in its proposal for a new party programme, writing that Sweden should open its borders and welcome anyone who wants to come to the country. Anybody who wants to should be able to create a future here, per Angsbo, chairman of the Centre Party Programme Group, told the Aftonbladet newspaper. According to Angsbo, who is a city commissioner in Stockholm, open borders are a necessity due to Sweden's lack of labour power and the flight from sparsely populated areas. A nationalist spokesperson said, "This is where it starts. From greed, not necessity." World news. In the wake of the horrific school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, voices across America, and indeed across the globe, have been calling for stricter gun control laws. Yet what gun control measure could have prevented this crime? The state of Connecticut already have strict gun control laws in place, at least 3 of which the shooter broke, as he could have only obtained the weapons through illegal means. A World-A-Date writer comments, "The odd thing is that parents who are horrified by real violence are drowning their children in simulated violence," it's been reported in Natural News. The great contradiction in the recent Newtown, Connecticut elementary school shooting is that many of the parents who are horrified at violence directed at their children are the very same parents who allow their children to be inundated with simulated violence from every imaginable direction. Many of the very same kids who were seen crying after the shooting incident will go home and watch simulated murder on television, where mass murder is considered normal and acceptable. Beyond simulated violence on television, children are also routinely exposed to violence through Hollywood movies. The violence in movies has dramatically escalated over the past 2 decades, to the point where movies that are considered PG-13 today would have been rated R just 20 years ago. The message? It's okay for children to witness mass murder on the big screen over and over again, while dosing them up with mild-altering psychiatric drugs that we already know are linked to violent thoughts and suicidal behaviour. We are all approaching this from the wrong angle, taking the right away to defend one's home and yet putting more violence out there in the meantime. Sharia thirsty takes solid first-round lead in Egypt's constitutional referendum. Al-Aram is reporting the 10 individual governorate and pooled final results, noting that all these unofficial tallies are from the governorate's presiding judges, except Cairo's, which are from the tallies of the Freedom and Justice Party, the popular Current Operations Centre and Al Jazeera TV network. The Cairo tally favoured no votes, 56.9%, and yes votes, 43.1%. But the overall tally was yes, 56.50%, no, 43.50%. These results elicited a predictably crowing response from the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party. One of the men pardoned by Morsi, the new Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt, was Mustafa Hamza, the head of the Islamic group, an organisation that was responsible for the Luxor massacre of foreign tourists. The Luxor massacre consisted of an hour of torture, mutilation and murder that would have sickened even Breivik. But what is an incomprehensible atrocity to the Western mind is an act of courage and bravery to the Muslim mind. And it is on such atrocities that the Salafi Crusades will build their caliphate of blood and bone. Reported in Natural News, it's like something ripped right out of a dystopian futuristic sci-fi novel. A US patent has been uncovered that describes electronic handcuffs capable of delivering torturous electroshocks, gas injections and injectable chemical restraints to prisoners who wear them. The cuffs can be remote controlled by prison guards, cops or MPs to deliver stronger or weaker electroshocks as desired, or even chemical injections. The handcuffs are able to deliver electroshock torture in combination with RFID chips that determine the distance between prisoners and weapons or other objects. If the prisoner wearing the cuffs approaches too closely to an RFID equipped object, they are electroshocked. Natural News has learnt that the inventors of these electroshock torture handcuffs are the same people involved in the manufacture and marketing of S&M sex toy handcuffs. Thought for the day. How long will the world ignore Islam in Europe? Our world leaders and powers that seem to be ignoring the very real and actual threat of encroaching Islam in the UK and Europe today. All fears and concerns from ordinary people with ordinary views are being put aside under the titles of either racist or non-progressive. More and more stories are coming in on real violence being carried out in communities occupied, for that is what it is, occupation, by members of the Islamic communities, who seem unable to live a fairly civilised Western lifestyle without causing trouble. They act out their violence along with a sickening pretence of peace and love, which of course gets most Western minds confused. It's something we're not used to. We're used to outright dictators and warmongers. That is what the European mindset has lived with for centuries, not this creeping, oiling invasion by stealth. We are not alone, however. Already acts of violence have seeped into Europe which are coming to light, however not through the mainstream press or media, who are only too happy to make a meal of an immigrant nurse's suicide and a terrible killing spree in the United States, neither of which, although awful, directly affect our lives, unless you go for mass hysteria and bunches of wasted flowers. In the UK, Labour still can't face facts on immigration, and we have Millipede extolling the virtues of integration, which of course needs two or more sets of people to do. Islam and its followers do not want to integrate. They want to convert and submerge. And this must be obvious even to a clunkhead and product of the progressive society like Millipede, clinging onto his stone like fun by his rather protuberant nose. Last week the BBC and the Labour Party, after a decade seeking to crush all public debate on immigration, were finally forced to confront the truth with the bulletins on Tuesday, with the extraordinary news from the 2011 census that 7.5 million foreign-born residents now live in England and Wales, almost 4 million of whom have arrived since 2001. Mr Millipede admitted that Labour did too little to tackle the realities of segregation in communities that were struggling to cope. Just words and too little, too late. Meanwhile in Denmark, the Danish are feeling the brunt of massive Muslim immigration as well. There are only two gangs that rule in Norborough, Copenhagen, and they are Muslim. The Blaggersbanden and the Brothers, and Jihad Watch has earlier reported on Muslim extortion against non-Muslim businesses in Copenhagen. Non-Muslim businesses are being approached and threatened for being in a Muslim section of Copenhagen, bearing in mind that they have been there since well before the newcomers' occupation. A female bar owner stood up against Muslims mafia's jizya demand. A 67-year-old Jane Peterson, owner of the Café Viking, has become a national hero after she spoke out in public against the Muslim gangs that demanded protection money from her because she runs a cafe in their territory. The cafe in Norrbro in Copenhagen Thursday evening was filled as never before, with hundreds of people who showed up to support the owner, who earlier Thursday stood up and told publicly how a gang tried to force her to pay protection money after threats and vandalism. She received support from both the neighbourhood and the people who showed up following a request at the Facebook group No to Bullies, Yes to Beers. A new case of jizya extortion in Norfolk in Copenhagen was reported to the police. Now this time the claim was not directed at a tavern but a local church. Now the criminals have turned against the Holy Cross Church on Kapelvej in the heart of Norrbro, a few hundred metres from Blagadsplads. 3 young boys met up twice a week at the rear entrance to the church. Here they notified the verger that the church was in their territory and therefore had to pay money. Mikkel Gabriel Christoffersen, president of Blagadsplads parish, said no and since then has not been approached again. But he has confirmed to Ekstrabladet DK that the church has reported the matter to the police. Disgusting as this is, these demands are on the increase. In the UK so far, they just stick to abusing and abducting our young girls without fear of payback, but nothing stays still in this world and the demands will get more violent. Now the jizya, a demand based squarely on the dictates of the Quran, that much lauded protection and Islamic justice that Sharia law has in store for non-Muslims who refuse to convert to Islam. Rather like a penalty clause if you run a business or obviously a church in areas they take over. Invite barbarians into your midst and this is what you can expect. And meanwhile it's imperative that Danish males, speaking here in the aggregate, grow a big one. In other words, time to kick ass. So we have the French socialists bowing down, but the French people rising up. We have the Swedes who do not seem to know what to do at all except build special houses for the Muslim bastards to breed in. The Germans, well, they've gone over to the dark side now to avoid any even vague similarity to the Third Reich. The Spanish, Greeks and Italians are too poor now to do anything except get bailed out by the EU, which is part of the source of the problem. Similarly, the Eastern Europeans who tried some years ago to get rid of their encroaching Muslim population and now have a fresh wave of heavily subsidised Muslims courtesy of the United Morons and the EU and no right of appeal for their human rights either. So we also have escalating violence in Cologne with the Muslim taxi drivers, which no doubt will go unpunished. I could see the way they acted in Believe It or Not, Camberley some years ago when they started to take over the local run taxi ranks in the town. It must have been about 8 years and my car was out of action, my husband was working away and I needed to go to Frimley Hospital for an urgent appointment. I rang for a taxi for a certain time. They did not turn up. I rang again and was told he'd driven up the London road and didn't see my number. I then lived in a house which was in a private turn-off and had given directions to the Englishwoman on the board of exactly how to get there. He was already late and she told me to go out and stand on the road so he could see me. I did this, although feeling like death warmed over and it was midwinter, and sure enough, half an hour late and speaking no English at all, I got picked up by an Iraqi, Pakistani or something of that ilk. I had to direct him to the hospital, which was difficult as my Urdu or Pashto ain't so hot, and was grateful to get there. Now, in the real old-fashioned world, a taxi driver should not get a taxi unless he has either passed his driving test, can speak the language of his passengers, and knows where the bloody hell he's going. Is that too much to ask of an immigrant, who is after all getting paid for doing a job his cousin probably got him in the first place? Rant over, but you can see just how accommodating we have become since the last war in this country and Europe. This would not have happened anywhere before the last war and massive immigration. We are not only welcoming these people in, or rather doing nothing to stop them coming in, and prospering, but our governments are not looking after us at all in allowing them to take over under the guise of multiculturalism. It is not multiculturalism, it is state genocide and nothing less. It is not blame the Muslim time, but facts are facts, and it is these people more so than any other religion that frankly take the piss and seemingly get paid for it. If we in the British National Party went around telling our people to behead the Muslims, what would happen? Answers on the postage stamp, please. It seems as if there is a conspiracy to keep quiet, and it'll all go away. Do not discuss it. Do not meet neighbours and talk about anything other than the weather, because people do not want to be seen to be racist. Certainly do not discuss it with your children, because most of us have bred a generation of liberal lefties who cannot face the truth, however unpalatable. In fact, we have the true British nature of ignoring something until it gets too great for even us to ignore, and when practically all is lost, we come up with a solution or ask the Americans for help. And it ain't coming this time. They're ignoring the problem just as we are. If we had fought immigration and for our country the way we fought against the Germans, we would not have this problem today, or the related problems. So, no EU, no Channel Tunnel, no immigration, no foreign aid. But we would have more manufacturing, a decent level of education, a fully functioning national health, more intensive and subsidised farming and fisheries mantra, decent TV, a fairly passable press, and total independence from Europe. We could choose who we sold our goods to and also whom to import from. We would not be saddled with crap from abroad we could not pay for, or indeed should not pay for. Our bankers would be working for the country, not themselves, and likewise our ministers. Our religion would be paramount in schools, and if we did have a small immigration policy, they would have to conform radically to our way of living. It sounds perfect, but it is not. Obviously there'd be hard times, but then what do you want? Hard times paying for strangers or hard times paying for our own? Your choice. Mozart's 5-year plan or what we have now. And finally, the older it is, the better it is for you. The secret of why the French live longer is Roquefort cheese. Eating this cheese could help guard against cardiovascular disease despite its high fat and salt content, according to new research that suggests why the French enjoy good health. It is reported by Reuters that the properties of the blue cheese, which is aged in caves in the south of France, were found to work best in acidic environment of the body. Scientists discovered that the cheese, known for its mould and green veins, has specific anti-inflammatory properties. It could provide clues to the French paradox and explain why people who live in the country enjoy good health despite favouring a diet high in saturated fat. This presenter comments that it isn't high fat or salt might get you, it's sugar and too much fast food and takeaways which are packed high with MSG, monosodium glutamate that is. Nothing beats good smelly cheese, bickies and a glass of vino. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.